The AI PC was supposed to be the biggest thing to happen to personal computing in a decade. Microsoft called it an inflection point. Intel, Qualcomm, and AMD all lined up behind it. HP, Dell, Lenovo, Asus, every major manufacturer rushed to slap an AI label on their new devices and charge a premium for the privilege. But HP's chief commercial officer, David McQuarrie, recently told Fortune magazine that convincing companies to buy AI PCs is so difficult that his strategy going forward is to make AI completely invisible in the workflow. This is the language of an industry trying to figure out why the wave never came. To understand the gap between expectation and reality, you need to go back to May 2024, when Microsoft formally introduced a new category of Windows computer called the Copilot plus PC. The pitch was ambitious. But these weren't just faster laptops. Microsoft said they were the most intelligent Windows PCs ever built, machines equipped with a new type of chip called a neural processing unit, or NPU, capable of performing at least 40 trillion operations per second. That specific threshold, 40 tops in industry shorthand, was the minimum Microsoft set for a device to qualify as a Copilot plus PC and unlock a set of exclusive AI features built into Windows 11. The flagship feature was called Recall. The idea was striking in its ambition. Your PC would constantly take snapshots of everything you do, every document, every website, every email, store it locally on the device, and let you search your own computing history in plain language. Forget what you were looking at last Tuesday? Just type a description, and Recall would find it. Microsoft framed this as giving users a kind of photographic memory for their computers. HP, Dell, Lenovo, Acer, Samsung, and Asus all launched Copilot Plus certified devices. HP went particularly hard at this, unveiling products like the OmniBook X and EliteBook X built around Qualcomm's Snapdragon X Elite chip. HP's president of personal systems, Alex Cho, called it the Big Bang moment for AI PCs. At HP's Amplify Partner Conference in March 2025, the company announced over 80 new products, positioning itself as the company with the world's largest AI PC portfolio. The stock market responded. Analysts talked about a coming supercycle of PC upgrades driven by AI. The narrative was clean. Hundreds of millions of people are still running machines from the Windows 10 era. And the end of Microsoft's support for Windows 10 in October 2025 would push them to upgrade. If manufacturers could tie that upgrade cycle to AI, they had a massive business opportunity. That was the theory. Here's what actually happened. The first sign of trouble came almost immediately, from the hardware itself. When the initial Copilot Plus devices launched in mid-2024, the vast majority used Qualcomm's Snapdragon X chips, because Intel's competing processors weren't ready yet. These Qualcomm chips run on an architecture called ARM. It's the same type of chip architecture that powers iPhones and Android devices. That's efficient, it's fast, and the battery life numbers were genuinely impressive. But there was a significant problem for business and enterprise customers. A huge portion of the software that companies depend on, legacy applications, specialist tools, internal systems, was built for a different chip architecture. Running that software on an ARM-based machine required an emulation layer, and emulation introduced compatibility issues. IT departments, which are responsible for making sure thousands of employees can do their jobs without technical problems, were understandably cautious. Many simply decided to wait. Then there was the earlier generation of so-called AI PCs from 2023 and early 2024, machines with Intel's Meteor Lake processors. These chips did include an NPU, but it was only capable of around 11 TOPS. That's barely a quarter of the 40 TOPS Microsoft set as the minimum for Copilot Plus features. So consumers who bought those machines on the assumption that they were getting AI-ready hardware discovered they didn't even qualify for the headline features Microsoft was promoting. As technology analyst Rob Jackson described it, those early devices got off on the wrong foot, and first impressions in consumer technology are hard to recover from. Even when the hardware improved, a deeper problem remained. The software to justify it barely existed. The NPU inside these machines is genuinely useful for a specific type of computing task. Running AI inference locally, meaning processing AI calculations directly on the device, rather than sending your data to a server somewhere. That has real advantages. It's faster for certain tasks, it costs less at scale, and it keeps your data private. But in practice, almost all of the AI tools people actually use, ChatGPT, Google Gemini, Microsoft Copilot in its cloud-based form, run in the cloud. When you type a question into an AI chatbot, that request goes to a data center, gets processed by a massive server, and comes back to your screen. Your laptop's NPU plays no role in that at all. The result, as Jackson summarized it, laptops without a dedicated NPU can already handle most AI tasks, just slightly more slowly or with a bit more battery drain. The NPU helps at the margins, but it doesn't unlock anything most people genuinely need. And then there was Recall. Recall was meant to be the killer application, the one feature that would make people understand why they needed an AI PC. Instead, it became a case study in how quickly a promising idea can turn into a liability. Privacy researchers and security professionals examined what Recall was actually doing. It was continuously screenshotting everything on your screen, including private messages, banking information, passwords, confidential work documents, and personal photos. All of that data was being indexed and stored on the device. Microsoft argued this was safe because the data never left the machine and was protected by local encryption. But security experts pointed out that if your device was compromised by malware, that database of screenshots was an extraordinarily rich target. Every piece of sensitive information you'd seen on your computer in one searchable location. The backlash was immediate and significant enough that Microsoft was forced to delay the feature's rollout and redesign parts of it. One Recall eventually shipped in 2025 as an opt-in preview rather than a default experience, with additional safeguards added. But the damage to consumer trust was real. According to research on enterprise adoption, privacy concerns, particularly around Recall, became one of the primary reasons corporate IT departments remained skeptical of Copilot plus PCs. As one analysis put it, the perception of risk persisted even after Microsoft tightened its approach, especially in regulated industries like finance, healthcare, and legal services. The other Copilot plus exclusive features, things like Co-Creator and Paint, improved Windows search, enhanced webcam effects, were genuinely functional, but they were incremental. Better background blur on your video calls is a nice feature. It is not a reason to buy a new computer. Let's look at what the data actually shows, because the picture is more complicated than a simple failure story. By the fourth quarter of HP's 2025 fiscal year, which ended in October to 2025, AI PCs accounted for more than 30% of HP's overall PC shipments. HP's Personal Systems division, which covers PCs and laptops, reported revenue growth of 8% year over year. AI-enabled PC revenue at HP roughly doubled year over year, according to the company's CFO, Karen Parkhill. Globally, industry analysts projected that AI PCs would represent about 31% of total PC sales in 2025, roughly 77 million units, and potentially reach 50% of the market by 2026. So AI PCs are selling. But here's the critical distinction that gets lost in the headline numbers. They're selling because AI PCs are increasingly just the only kind of PC manufacturers are making, not because consumers went out looking for AI features. As research from Parks Associates makes clear, most of the adoption happening is attributable to standard hardware upgrade cycles. People whose computers are old and need replacing, who happen to end up with a device that has an NPU inside. They're not upgrading because of Recall or Copilot. They're upgrading because their old machine is slow or because Windows 10 is losing support. That's a fundamentally different story than what was being sold in the spring of 2024. The vision was of consumers demanding AI-native machines, lining up to pay a premium for intelligence baked into the hardware. What actually happened is that manufacturers baked AI hardware into everything and called the resulting sales figures a success. Meanwhile, actual enterprise adoption, companies deliberately deploying AI PC fleets because they wanted the AI features, remained slow throughout 2025. According to Computer World's reporting, enterprise customers were still asking fundamental questions. Why should we pay more for AI hardware when we don't have a clear use case? Quantifying the return on investment, as one analyst put it, was nebulous. This is where HP's strategy becomes genuinely interesting, because what the company did in late 2025 and early 2026 reveals a lot about where they think this market is actually going. In November to 2025, HP announced it would cut between 4,000 and 6,000 jobs by the end of fiscal 2028, representing roughly 10% of its global workforce. The company framed this as an AI-driven transformation, using automation to reduce costs in product development, customer support, and internal operations. CEO Enrique Lores said the plan would generate approximately $1 billion in gross savings over 3 years, but that restructuring is happening against a backdrop of real margin pressure. Memory chip prices are surging because of massive demand from AI data centers, and those same chips are a significant component of every PC HP makes. Memory costs had risen to between 15 and 18% of a typical PC's cost, Lores acknowledged, and the rate of increase was accelerating. That's a cost HP has to either absorb or pass on to customers, and passing costs onto consumers who are already skeptical of paying a premium for AI features is not a straightforward proposition. At the same time, HP made a notable acquisition in February 2025, The company bought key technology and talent from Humane, a startup that had built an AI-powered platform called Cosmos. Humane had been trying to build an AI wearable device and struggled commercially, but the underlying technology for coordinating AI requests across different devices had potential. HP framed the acquisition as an acceleration of its ability to build devices that intelligently orchestrate AI both locally and in the cloud. The strategic direction HP is describing is a subtle but significant departure from the original AI PC pitch. Instead of selling people on specific AI features they can name and point to, HP's Chief Commercial Officer, David McQuarrie, is now talking about making AI invisible, embedding it so deeply into the normal experience of using a device that people benefit without realizing they're using AI at all. In his conversation with Fortune, McQuarrie suggested that the answer to slow adoption is to stop asking customers to understand or embrace AI and instead just let it work quietly in the background. That is a real insight, and it may well be the right long-term strategy. But it represents an acknowledgement that the first wave of AI PC marketing, the features lists, the TOPS benchmarks, the Copilot Plus branding, didn't resonate the way that industry hoped it would. There's a broader lesson here that goes past laptops and quarterly earnings. The AI PC story is a compressed version of a pattern that appears regularly in technology. A new capability arrives, it gets marketed to consumers before there's a compelling reason for most of them to care. The sales numbers disappoint relative to expectations, the industry recalibrates, and eventually, usually, the technology finds its footing and becomes normalized. What makes the AI PC situation particularly instructive is that the underlying technology is real and functional. NPUs do accelerate certain AI workloads. Local AI inference does offer genuine advantages in speed, privacy, and cost. The problem was never that the hardware didn't work. The problem was that the consumer case for it was assembled before the software ecosystem was ready, and the messaging around it introduced more confusion than clarity. A McKinsey survey from late 2025 found that 2/3 of companies were still in the experimentation phase of AI adoption. A non-implementation, experimentation, the enterprise IT world moves slowly and carefully, especially with anything that touches security and compliance. Intel, one of the major chip suppliers for these devices, acknowledged that slow AI PC adoption comes down to a lack of concrete understanding of the platform, not hardware limitations. The Windows 10 end of support deadline in October 2025 will push a wave of corporate PC upgrades over the coming year or two. HP is betting that this refresh cycle, combined with maturing software and a better developed story around privacy and local AI processing, will drive real demand. Whether that plays out as HP hopes depends heavily on whether the software ecosystem, the actual applications that run on these NPUs and deliver meaningful value, catches up with the hardware that's already been shipped. So where does that leave us? The AI PC category is not dead. The numbers show it's growing, and by 2026, the majority of new PCs being manufactured will have an NPU inside. But the narrative that AI would create a new kind of consumer demand, a reason to buy a computer specifically because of its AI capabilities, has not materialized in the way the industry promised. Dell's executives said it plainly at CES 2026. HP's chief commercial officer said it in a different way, acknowledging that the path forward is to make AI so seamless that customers don't need to think about it. Both positions are honest responses to the same underlying reality. The label AI PC has not been a compelling sell. The companies that figure out how to close that gap, not through marketing, but through genuinely useful software that does things people actually want done on their local hardware, will be in a strong position as this technology matures. The ones that keep relying on benchmark numbers and feature lists that most people don't understand will keep running into the same wall. For consumers, the practical conclusion is straightforward. If you need a new computer, the one you buy today will almost certainly have AI hardware inside it, and that's fine. But don't pay a steep premium specifically for AI features unless you have a specific concrete use for them right now. The technology will be there when the software to justify it arrives. The industry built the runway. It's still waiting for the plane.